The apartment was cold, and there was no money to turn up the heat. Nicole sat on the warm couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching her 2-year-old daughter play with a toy that had belonged to Nicole's own mother. The toy was old and faded, but her daughter, Amara, loved it. She pushed it across the floor, making little sounds of joy that broke Nicole's heart because they came from a child who didn't know how hard things were. A child who didn't understand that her mother was terrified. Nicole was 26 years old, and she'd been struggling since Amara was born. The father had left when he found out about the pregnancy. He'd made it clear that he wasn't interested in being involved, and Nicole had stopped asking him for help a long time ago. She had a job, but it was part-time work at a grocery store that barely paid enough to cover rent and utilities. Everything else, food, childcare, medicine when Amara got sick, everything was a constant calculation of what she could afford and what she couldn't. The refrigerator was almost empty. There was some eggs, a little bit of butter, some vegetables that were starting to go bad. But there was no milk. Amara needed milk. The doctor had been clear about that. Children needed milk for their bones and teeth and growth. And Nicole's daughter wasn't getting enough of it because Nicole couldn't afford to buy enough. She'd been running a mental calculation all morning. She could ask her mother for help, but her mother was struggling too. She could go to a food bank, which she'd done before, but the last time she went, they were out of milk. She could try to pick up extra shifts at work, but she'd already asked, and there weren't any available, or she could sell something. Her eyes drifted to the small jewelry box on the shelf above the couch. It was a simple box, nothing fancy, but it contained the most valuable thing Nicole owned. Inside was a necklace, an heirloom that had been passed down through her family for generations. Her grandmother had given it to her mother, and her mother had given it to Nicole when she turned 18, telling her it was a symbol of strength and legacy. The necklace was beautiful. It was made of gold, real gold, with an intricate pattern of symbols carved into it. Nicole didn't know exactly how old it was, but her grandmother had told her it came from their family's heritage, that it meant something important. It was something Nicole had always kept with her, even when times were hard. It was one of the few things that connected her to her family's history, to her grandmother's memory. But Amara needed milk. Nicole got up from the couch and walked over to the shelf. She took down the jewelry box and opened it. The necklace caught the light from the window, gleaming gold against the dark velvet. She lifted it out and held it in her hands. It was warm from sitting in the sun, and it felt heavier than it looked. She could take it to a pawn shop. They usually gave you cash, but it wouldn't be the full value. She'd probably get maybe $50 or $100, depending on how much the gold was worth. That would be enough for milk for a few weeks, maybe some other things too. Some fresh vegetables, maybe some chicken, enough to give Amara what she needed. But it would mean letting go of this piece of her family. It would mean that someday, when Amara was older, Nicole wouldn't be able to give it to her the way her mother had given it to her. The chain would be broken. Nicole sat back down on the couch, still holding the necklace. She looked over at Amara, who was happily pushing the old toy across the floor, completely unaware that her mother was making decisions that would affect her whole life. "I'm sorry, Mom," Nicole whispered, thinking of her mother and her grandmother and all the women who had held this necklace before her. "I'm sorry, Grandma." She made a decision. It wasn't a happy decision. It was a desperate decision. But it was the only one she could live with. The next day, Nicole took the necklace to a jewelry store downtown. It was a nice place, the kind of store where Nicole would never normally shop. The window displayed expensive rings and watches and necklaces that cost more than Nicole made in a month. She felt out of place walking in, but she pushed that feeling aside. She needed to do this. A man looked up from behind the counter. He was probably in his 50s, with dark skin and kind eyes. He was dressed neatly in a button-up shirt, and he had the bearing of someone who'd spent his whole life in this business. "Can I help you?" he asked. Nicole approached the counter slowly. She was holding the necklace in her hand, and her hand was shaking slightly. She set it on the counter in front of him. "I'd like to sell this," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The man picked up the necklace and examined it carefully. He turned it over in his hands, studying the patterns, looking at the quality of the gold. As he did this, something changed in his expression. He looked up at Nicole, and there was something different in his eyes now. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "It's an heirloom," Nicole said. "It belonged to my family. My grandmother had it, and my mother gave it to me." The man turned the necklace over again, examining the inside of the pendant more closely. There were some markings there, tiny symbols that Nicole had always noticed but never fully understood. "Do you know anything about its history?" the man asked. He was still looking at the necklace, not at Nicole. "Not much," Nicole admitted. "I know my grandmother had it, and I know it's supposed to be meaningful to our family. But I don't know exactly how old it is or where it originally came from." "Why?" The man set the necklace down carefully on the counter. He looked at Nicole with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "This is a very special piece," he said. "The craftsmanship, the symbols, these are very specific. I've only seen a few pieces like this in my entire career." "Does that mean it's worth a lot?" Nicole asked. She felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she could get more money than she'd expected. Maybe she could give Amara milk and still help with other things. "It's worth something," the man said. He picked the necklace up again. "But before we talk about money, I need to ask you some questions. Can you tell me your mother's name? And your grandmother's name?" Nicole told him. She watched as he listened, his expression becoming more and more serious. "Can I ask you something?" the man said. "How old are you?" 26, Nicole said. The man looked away from her for a moment, and Nicole could see him thinking hard about something. When he looked back at her, there was something different in his face. Something that looked like emotion, carefully controlled. "I'm going to give you money for this necklace," he said. "But I don't want you to decide right now. I want you to come back tomorrow. I want to do some research on this piece, and I want to talk to you more about your family. Can you do that?" Nicole hesitated. She needed the money today. Amara needed milk today. But something in this man's tone suggested that this was important, that there was something more going on than just selling a necklace. "Okay," she said slowly. "I can come back tomorrow. What's your name?" the man asked. "Nicole," she said. "Nicole," the man repeated, like he was testing how the name sounded. "That's a beautiful name. I'm going to hold on to this necklace for you tonight. I won't sell it or do anything with it. I just need some time to think about some things." Nicole left the store feeling confused and a little bit worried. She'd expected a straightforward transaction. Give necklace, get money, buy milk. But instead, she had a mystery. Something about the necklace had affected this man in a way she didn't understand. That night, she lay awake in bed, thinking about the necklace and the jeweler's strange questions. She thought about her grandmother, who'd passed away when Nicole was young. She thought about her mother, who'd never talked much about where the necklace had come from, just that it was family and it was important. The next morning, Nicole went back to the jewelry store. The jeweler was waiting for her, and he had something in his hands besides the necklace. He had a folder full of papers and photographs. "I've been looking into something," he said without preamble, "and I need to ask you something very directly. Did your mother ever tell you about your father?" Nicole felt her stomach tighten. This was a complicated subject. Her father had left before she was born. Her mother had raised her alone, and they rarely talked about him. "No," Nicole said. She didn't really talk about it. Why? The jeweler looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something that would change everything. "Because I think I might be him." Nicole stood frozen in front of the counter. The words the jeweler had just said didn't make sense. She'd come in expecting to either get money for the necklace or have it appraised. She hadn't expected to hear something that would upend her entire understanding of her own life. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "What did you just say?" The jeweler set down the folder and took off his glasses. He rubbed his eyes like he was tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. When he looked at Nicole again, there was moisture in his eyes. "I think I'm your father," he said again. He said it like it was the most difficult thing he'd ever said. "Or at least I think I might be. And before you think I'm crazy, let me explain." Nicole felt like the ground had shifted underneath her. She gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "My name is Robert," the jeweler said, "and I knew your mother a very long time ago. We were together, briefly, about 27 years ago. It was complicated. I was going through some difficult things, and I wasn't ready to be a father. So when your mother told me she was pregnant, I left. I told her I couldn't be involved. I was young and stupid and scared, and I made a choice that I've regretted every single day since." Nicole wanted to interrupt him, to tell him he was mistaken, that her mother had never mentioned anything like this. But something in his voice, something in the way he was speaking, made her listen. "For years, I told myself it was better that way," Robert continued. "I told myself that your mother was better off without me, that you were better off without me. But the truth is, I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped wondering what you looked like, what you were like, whether you were happy. I've looked for you so many times, but I never found you. Your mother had moved away, and I had no way to track you down." Robert picked up the necklace again. He held it carefully, almost reverently. "Then you walked in with this," he said, "and I recognized it immediately. I remember when your mother bought it. It was just after we met. She went to a jeweler in another city and had this made. It was a tradition in her family, something symbolic. And I remember her telling me about the symbols, what they meant. They represented strength and family and continuity." He turned the necklace over so Nicole could see the inside of the pendant, where the tiny symbols were carved. "These specific symbols," Robert said, "they're from a particular region, a particular cultural tradition. When I saw them, when I looked at them again, everything clicked into place. The timeline, your name, the fact that you have a daughter who's about the same age I was when I found out about you. All of it added up." Nicole felt tears starting in her eyes, but she didn't know what she was crying about. She was confused and overwhelmed and scared and angry all at the same time. "This is crazy," she said. "My mother would have told me. She wouldn't just not tell me if my father was someone she knew." "I believe you," Robert said. "I believe that you didn't know. Your mother may have decided not to tell you about me, or she may have been protecting you from something. I don't know. But I'm going to be honest with you about something. A few years ago, I saw your mother. It was by chance, at a market. I recognized her immediately, even though years had passed. I tried to talk to her, and she made it very clear that she didn't want me in your life. She said that I'd made my choice years ago, and I couldn't just come back and disrupt things." Robert set the necklace down gently on the counter between them. "So I stopped trying," he said. "I respected her wishes. But I never stopped looking at your community, hoping to catch a glimpse of you someday. And now you've walked into my store. And you're here because you're struggling, because you need to sell this necklace to buy milk for your daughter. And I can't not acknowledge what this means." Nicole sat down in the chair behind her. She felt like she might fall over if she didn't sit down. "I don't know what to say," she said. "You don't have to say anything right now," Robert said. "But I want to show you something. He went into the back of the store and came back with a box. It was a simple wooden box, but when he opened it, Nicole's breath caught. Inside were photographs. There were photographs of a young woman who looked like Nicole's mother. There were photographs of her mother and a young man together, looking happy. And there were other things too. Newspaper clippings, documents, a baby blanket. After you were born, I tried to see you, Robert said quietly. I was young and I was stupid, but when I found out I had a daughter, something changed in me. I wanted to be part of your life, but your mother wouldn't let me. She said I'd given up that right. So instead, I kept these things. I kept every piece of information I could find about you. When you were in the newspaper for winning a school award, I kept a clipping. When your mother's address showed up in a directory, I wrote it down. I never contacted you or your mother, but I never stopped watching from a distance. He pulled out a photograph and showed it to Nicole. It was a photograph of Nicole when she was about 10 years old. She didn't know who had taken it, but there she was, smiling on a street corner. I took this, Robert said. I'm sorry. That's probably invasive and weird. But I needed to see you. I needed to know that you were real and that you were okay. Nicole looked at the photograph of herself as a child. She looked happy in that photograph. She looked like she didn't have a care in the world. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because you're here, Robert said. Because you're struggling and I can help. But more than that, because I'm tired of pretending that you don't exist. I'm tired of carrying around all these photographs and memories and regrets. And because your daughter, my granddaughter, deserves to know her grandfather if she wants to. Neko felt a surge of emotion at that word. Granddaughter. She'd never thought of anyone having a grandfather. She'd grown up without one, and she'd always thought that was just how it was for her. I need to talk to my mother, Nicole said finally. I understand, Robert said. But before you go, I want to do something about the necklace. I don't think you should sell it. I think it's too important. So I'm going to give you money for it anyway. Not because I'm buying it, but because I'm your father and your daughter needs milk. He pulled out his wallet and set down several $100 bills on the counter. That's $400, he said. That should cover milk and other things for a while. And if you ever need help, if you ever need anything, I want you to know that you can come to me. Nicole looked at the money. She looked at Robert. She looked at the necklace. I don't know what to do with this information, she said. You don't have to decide anything right now, Robert said. Just take the money. Take the necklace. And when you're ready, talk to your mother. Then, if you want to, come back and we can talk more. Nicole gathered the money and the necklace. She put them in her bag carefully, like they might break. What's your daughter's name? Robert asked. My granddaughter's name? Amara, Nicole said. Robert smiled, and for the first time, Nicole could see something of herself in his face. She could see the same nose, the same way he smiled, something in the structure of his face that was familiar because it was hers. That's a beautiful name, Robert said. I hope you'll tell her about me someday. Nicole left the store in a daze. She walked down the street holding the money and the necklace, trying to process everything Robert had told her. She thought about her mother, about the things her mother had never told her. She thought about the years she'd spent without a father and wondered if her mother had been protecting her or punishing her or just trying to survive. When she got home, her mother was there. She'd come over to watch Amara while Nicole was out. She looked up when Nicole came in, and immediately something in her expression changed. She looked like she'd been caught doing something wrong. We need to talk, Nicole said. She held up the necklace. About this. About my father. About why you never told me that he wanted to be part of my life. Her mother's face went pale. She stood up slowly, like she was preparing for something difficult. I was wondering when this day would come, her mother said quietly. I suppose I always knew it would eventually. Come sit down. We have a lot to talk about." And for the first time in her life, Nicole was going to hear the real story of her father. The real story of why he'd left, why her mother had kept him away, and what had happened in the years since then. She was going to hear the truth about the necklace and what it really meant. And she was finally going to understand the pieces of her own story that had been missing for so long. After Nicole left the jewelry store that second day, James couldn't focus on anything else. He sat in his shop, looking at the necklace, thinking about Nicole's face, trying to piece together memories that were more than 25 years old. The timing matched. The necklace matched. And something about Nicole's features, something about the way she spoke, something fundamental had felt like looking at a mirror of his own past. James had been young when it happened. He was in his early 20s, fresh out of a jewelry apprenticeship, trying to build his business. He'd met Nicole's mother, who'd been beautiful and kind, and had made him feel like he was capable of being something more than he was. They'd had a brief relationship, intense and passionate, the kind that feels like forever when you're that young. But James had been afraid. He'd been afraid of commitment, afraid of responsibility, afraid of failing. When Nicole's mother had told him she was pregnant, he'd panicked. Instead of stepping up, instead of being the man he should have been, he'd run. He'd convinced himself that he was doing her a favor, that she was better off without him. He'd left and tried to move on with his life, but he'd never really moved on. He'd spent the next 25 years wondering about the child he'd never met. He'd wondered if it was a boy or a girl. He'd wondered what they looked like, what their personality was like, whether they were happy. He'd built his jewelry business, been successful, but there was always this hole in his life, this empty space where his child should have been. He'd tried to find Nicole's mother over the years. He'd looked for her, asked around, but she'd moved and changed her life, and he couldn't locate her. Eventually, he'd given up, but he'd never stopped thinking about it. He'd never stopped wondering. And now, by some miracle of chance or fate or whatever you wanted to call it, his daughter had walked into his store. She'd been desperate enough to sell something precious, and that desperation had brought them together. James wasn't sure if he believed in God or destiny, but he was starting to. James closed the store early that day. He told his assistant that he needed to do some research, and then he went to his apartment upstairs and pulled out old boxes from his closet. He found photographs from his early 20s. He found letters from Nicole's mother that he'd kept, even though he'd tried to throw them away 100 times. He found a piece of paper where he'd written the names of 2 possible baby names, one male and one female. Back when he'd still been thinking about becoming a father before, fear had taken over. One of the names was Nicole. He didn't remember writing that down. But there it was, in his own handwriting. He'd chosen that name for his daughter, a daughter he'd never met. And somehow, his real daughter had that same name. James spent the next week doing research. He went to the public library and looked through old records. He called people he'd known back then, people who might remember Nicole's mother or know where she'd gone. He was gentle about it, casual, just asking around like he was thinking about old friends. But he was searching methodically, carefully, trying to track down the woman he'd loved and abandoned. He also researched the necklace itself. He had connections in the jewelry world, people who knew about antique pieces and family heirlooms. He made some calls, sent some pictures to experts, and learned that the necklace was quite old, probably from Africa originally, brought over by ancestors generations ago. The symbols on it told a story, represented a family line, a legacy. It was the kind of thing that would be passed down carefully, from mother to daughter, each generation understanding that it meant something. This was a family that cared about its history. This was a family that valued connection and memory and legacy. And somehow, that gave James hope. It meant that his daughter was part of a family that had substance, that had meaning beyond just surviving day to day. After a week of searching, James found something. A woman who remembered Nicole's mother. The woman still had her contact information because they'd been friends back then, and they'd kept in touch, though sporadically. James called the woman, explained that he was trying to reconnect with an old friend, and got Nicole's mother's phone number. His hand shook as he dialed. When Nicole's mother answered, she recognized his voice immediately. There was a moment of silence after she said his name. "Hi," James said. He didn't know what else to say. "It's been a long time," she said. Her voice was older now, but it was still her. He would have recognized it anywhere. "I know," James said. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for leaving. I'm sorry for not being there. I'm sorry for abandoning you when you needed me." There was a long silence. James waited, barely breathing. "Why are you calling now?" she asked finally. "Because your daughter came into my jewelry store," James said. "She came in to sell a necklace, an heirloom that you gave her, I think. And I recognized it. I recognized the symbols, the pattern. And I realized that she's my daughter. And I can't let this chance go by without trying to make things right." Another silence. James could hear his ex-partner breathing on the other end of the line. "Her name is Nicole," her mother said finally. "I know," James said. "She told me. I had actually chosen that name for my daughter, back when I still thought I was going to be a father. I wrote it down once and never threw it away." "She's a good person," Nicole's mother said, and James could hear the fierceness in her voice. "She's struggling, but she's good. She loves her daughter more than anything. She works hard. She doesn't complain even though life has been unfair to her. And I need you to understand something. If you're going to be in her life, you need to be there for real. You can't just disappear again. You can't just come and go. She deserves better than that." "I know," James said. "I'm not asking for a second chance with you. That ship has sailed. But I'm asking for a chance with her. To be her father, to help her, to be part of her life. If she have me." Nicole's mother gave him her address. She told him that Nicole probably wouldn't believe him at first, that he'd need to have proof, that he should be prepared for her to be skeptical. She told him things about Nicole, small details about her life and her personality, things that made James feel like he was beginning to know his daughter. When James hung up the phone, he sat on his couch for a long time, just processing everything. He had a daughter. He had a grandchild. He had a second chance that he'd never expected to get. The next day, James did something he'd been planning. He went to a bank and withdrew cash. Not a lot, but enough. He put it in an envelope along with a letter he'd written, trying to explain who he was and what he'd discovered. He put the necklace in a box with the envelope and the cash. Then he went to Nicole's address. He found the apartment building, small and worn, and he sat in his car for a long time, trying to gather his courage. Finally, he got out and knocked on her door. Nicole answered, surprised to see him. She was holding Amara on her hip, and the little girl looked at James with the curious eyes of a toddler meeting a stranger. "Hi," James said. He felt tears starting to form, but he held them back. "I know this is strange, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out." He told her everything. He told her about her mother, about how he'd met her, about the relationship they'd had. He told her about the pregnancy and about his fear and his shame at running away. He told her about spending 25 years wondering about his daughter. He told her about the necklace and how it had brought her to his store, how it had given him a second chance. Nicole listened with an expression that was hard to read. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I believe you," she said finally. "I know," James said. "That's why I brought this." He handed her the letter, the cash, and he pulled out his phone and showed her the old photographs, the ones with her mother in them. He showed her the piece of paper where he'd written her name all those years ago. Nicole looked at the photographs. She looked at the letter. She looked at him, really looked at him, like she was trying to see herself in his face. "I need time," she said. "I need to talk to my mom." "I understand," James said. "Take all the time you need. But I want you to know something. I want to be part of your life. And I want to help. Not just money. I want to be your father. If you'll let me." He turned to leave, but Nicole called after him. "Wait," she said. He turned back. "The necklace," she said. She was holding the box. "You're giving me money and the necklace back?" "It's your heirloom," James said. "It belongs with you. It belongs with your family. And someday, you can give it to Amara. And when you do, you can tell her that it brought her grandmother and grandfather together. That it brought their whole family back together. That sometimes the things that matter most to us are the things that connect us to the people we love." Nicole held the box, and James could see tears in her eyes now. "Go talk to your mother," he said gently. "And when you're ready, if you want to see me again, you know where to find me." He left, and as he walked back to his car, he felt like something fundamental in his life had shifted. He'd spent 25 years carrying the weight of his mistakes. And now, by some miracle, he might finally get the chance to make them right.